This is a wing off a car. This has just been cut away, not for access, just to make it visible to people so they can see how it's done. And these bits are all added, just hold the relative position of that to that, and it to that as well. Not only does it act as this demonstration of what can be done, but it will be used later to prove the units before they go out. I need to point out that I've done this to cars I've been involved in including cars I drive. I've modified. I've done about 9 or 10 now cars, but really I have to have a disclaimer that what you do to your car is your responsibility. I can only tell you what I've done to my cars that I'm involved in, and I can supply the parts. So why are we going to all this trouble? Well, obviously there's 50 years of progress between that and this. If you look at this thing, if you look at the equivalent of that in here, that thread there, just if you look, just ran on a relatively flat surface, so that it only had point contact. A modern ball race, if you look at that shape of that groove, it's to the shape of the balls, so you get a more surface contact. So you've got progress in engineering, you've got progress in materials. This thing is mounted on needle rollers. There's another bearing there. This, as you gather, is a piston within a cylinder, so that's well supported. The drop shaft, that shaft that goes from there to there, that's in a needle roller there, a needle roller there, and this thrust that's applied to apply that downward pressure for this thing to be thoroughly engaged, that's also got a thrust bearing on it. So it's better engineered, better materials, better supported bearing wise. So that's why it's worth doing.
And it's easier to turn.
Yeah, and you've got the benefit of power steering. And it's been put together to try and fit this steering box in such a way that we can get the operation of the arm out of the back, which saves having to change the internals inside here, which you have to do with the arm coming out of the front. That's essentially all this blue, duck egg blue setup is just to prove that that will go in.
So that.
Well, I'll turn it in that area just so you get a feel. That's the extent of its travel. Now the other close points are the two mentioned inside, further forward. As you can see, it's all clear.
Yeah.
To compensate for what we've done at that side, we have to fit this arm, this bracket, instead of the existing one. It fits on the equivalent of that at this side and goes there like that. It fits in there. And obviously this packing's thinner than that one because we've got that in as well. That's the bracket we've just talked about. That's welded to there and bolts onto there and stops that sort of movement.
Flexion, yeah.
It's got 4 fixings just like ours, our steering box, but I've added 2 more down here. And that plate goes under there and the bolts go through there. And they tie back. If you go around the other side, the tie back, in effect, you can see the plate there, the tie back to this fixing here. So everything's tied into that bracket that goes at this place that goes across. As you know, that's been dropped to accommodate it, that's been lengthened, that's been cut away to let it wire up. And when we go to the other side, you'll find this has been packed down as well. The bolts in here have been replaced with countersunk bolts to give clearance. Yeah. If you're ever using it, well, when you are using it in that position, okay? Yeah. Additionally, you'll see that this runs very close to the bump stop, so that has to be ground back a little to give clearance for that to operate backwards and forwards. This is the power system we're going to use. This is an electric motor and a pump, and it's a unit off a Saxo, and a Citroen 106 uses it. I've adapted these brackets to fit it onto the steering column, and there's a bit of adaptation here to get this high pressure fit in, and you can see what sort of fittings they are. So that proves that that pump will fit there, okay, and I can tell you that it's clear of the engine because I've had it inside a running car just to check it all out. This pump's the same fixing at this end. It's exactly the same pump really, except they've integrated that into here. So I may go towards this type of pump to save having to fit a bracket on here and do, because you can see that would replace that anyway. One of them needs to go to earth depending on what polarity you're using, because some people have gone off positive earth, negative earth, which is the more modern way of doing it. So depending on how your car's wired, you put one of these to earth. On the original cars they used a 45 amp relay, but I can buy a 70 amp relay, cheaper than that buy their 45 amp relay. So that's what I use, and it's fed through a 40 amp fuse, and it's fed direct from your connection where your starter motor is. That determines where we cut. We cut just beyond that wall so that the tube is clear for us inserting that into it. Okay, that goes inside this tube. That goes inside this tube. If you cut it the wrong side of that weld, you'd hit the weld. Okay, so we cut it just that side. So that determines where that cut is. It's not a fixed point, somewhere near there. And obviously we cut this shaft, this a bit further back to give a bit of clearance. Now when we actually do the welding of that, as you've seen the other film, you can take the steering wheel off and move it forward to keep the heat clear of that. And we wrapped a wet rag around this thing because there's some rubber involved in these bushes here. So basically that's what determines where you do your cutting. Yeah. And it's not, the cutting of that shaft is not critical. In fact, as long as you don't you take that weld out, it ain't critical to a few millimetres on either tube. So when I stick that in there, it just shows you that it will all go together with that in. Obviously I left it out for my ease, and seeing as all this were rotten anyway, I've cut it away. But you can see that that goes in. Okay? Yeah. I presume it's just to get a lift where it's not.
How heavy is the steering now then? Without power steering, how heavy is it? It's very heavy.
Horribly heavy.
Undrivable. Not now the driver.
And why, it's compounded by radials, is it?
You are? Yeah.
It's compounded by having radial tyres, I presume.
You know, I've got one of them, I never think of bloody using it. The difference.
Yeah, note to self, battery disconnect first.
It says so in the Haynes manual, Andrew.
Well, first of all, you take them 4 bolts out there.
Yeah.
Then you take, there's a little bolt, a bracket under there, across, that you need to take off. And then 4 bolts out of there, which makes that loose.
Right.
If somebody then goes in the car and winds it, you can literally wind it off. We'll take this off before we do it. We can then wind that off, and all the bits will drop inside the gearbox.
Right. Oh. Okay.
And then we're left with that exposing the screw thread inside, and then we move on from that.
So shall we do that first?
Yeah.
What is that tube then coming off the front? You say
It's the
wires?
wiring for the Steering controls.
Console wiring, horn.
Oh yeah, horn indicators.
Like you've got in your car.
Yeah.
In
So
fact, the same system in your car.
all the wiring goes.
People
through.
don't realise that it's clamped there. You can't get out of this inside the car without undoing that clamp.
Right.
Age-old idea.
And that's why a lot of people, you see, it's all chipped. If you look at a lot of old cars,
That's it.
it'll,
That's it.
it don't matter where you cut them, but leave a bit on to control, then you know where they came from. You know what I mean? It helps you with wiring later on. I think there's 5 of them in the wires in there.
There is. It would appear to be.
Eh?
Yeah, it looks like
There's
5.
5, yeah.
Doopy-doopy-doopy-doo.
That'll go back up the column on the outside and be reused. It's just make our connections on that end. Which will cut it there, and then we'll cut it again if necessary. Hang on, you'll
So
see,
the wiring goes down the outside of the tube then, does it?
Now, when we put the wiring back in, we'll bring it up, and it'll come here somewhere, and we'll have to put them. There's some more switches underneath to accommodate what you lost on here.
Right, you're reusing that?
Yeah. And you can cut that up to get that out if it won't come out. Sometimes it hits things. But it's useful tube, so I might take that with me. It is useful. I might take that. You can have it then. It is useful though.
Just joking, but look on your face.
Well, on the track rod end, you've 2 threads, a right and a left hand, so you can adjust its length. When you turn it, it gets longer or shorter when you turn the rod.
So this track rod end is discarded and replaced with another one which is adapted.
Yeah.
Never invented that.
We should have said that was going to happen. I'd have been on a real close-up. Never mind.
We can do it again.
No, it's all right. Let's not slow it down.
So we need that track rod end out to check whether it's the right hand thread or not. It's right hand or left hand.
Oh.
Is it right?
That's,
I am used to giving instructions, you know, as my
God, I
wife
don't
told
know.
me. She says, she always
we have noticed, Jim.
she always-
Is it the correct thread then?
Yep.
Right.
But it's only a case of if it were wrong way around, if that were left hand thread, we'd have to
Just only
turn
swap it
it
back.
around, yeah. Because there's no point me adapting for left and right hand threads, you only adapt for one of them.
Right, boss, next.
Have you know? We're going to cover that weld up because we're welding to edge of that, so we want to make sure that that weld's sound.
The top edge get it further in. That wants some light relief with a small Barnsley screwdriver,
Ah, yeah.
and that will go in.
Ah, I reckon so. I'm chuffed about that because I thought we were going to have to play about around that thing.
Right, so first thing then is to trim chassis leg back.
Yeah. You do what's necessary. I realise there's something to do, and there might be a bit to come off that corner, might there?
No,
Oh,
there
yeah.
isn't. Right,
Well-
so it's that edge there. And that edge there. Okay, right.
Hey, I'm right.
Could you just stop?
Right, I'll just cut a little winder in there for the adjuster peg.
Nice.
To go in.
Now, it's just... Bloody hell, it's almost there. How far in does it need to go? Does it have to go flat at chassis leg? There? Because because that's not looking.
Well, it has to go till that lines up.
Right, it's lined up now.
It looks
There.
pretty good. So what you do is you take that screw out and locate where you want the hole, and I've brought you an hole saw. Take that screw out.
Yep. These want welding up back as well.
The bottom to let the other one enter. The bottom one. Freeze is back in position, and I'm using this to help align it because we cut it away. If you look, I've put that tube in there, which lines the centre tube up, and then this lines up. This is inside the actual drive tube. So when I put that forward, I have a good idea it's in the right position. You need to grind it at all. Do you think it'll? There. Let me hold it there. Can you get one here? That's better, isn't it?
Touch more. Go on, lift the bugger up. There. That's better.
Right, do that.
It's alright, just relax.
It's on.
That's better. Cock on that.
Are we happy at that?
Oh, angle. Let's get another tack, a couple of tacks like this.
In that other thing, you know, that UJ. They'll come out when you cut that up.
Right, so you need to pull the tube out on the inside now, don't you?
Yeah, out of the way. And that might drop
Right.
out. It's got to have a certain amount of clearance, isn't it? Pull it forward now, it should pull out. That's it. It's pulled bearing out, look, can you see it? There's a dry bearing at the top.
Yeah.
Why is that come out? Anyway, it'll go back in one.
It will. Now you see that's far enough away to tack that.
Yeah, and then
Tack it, turn it over, tack the other side.
and then
Take
move
that
it
off.
down and weld it.
Yes.
You agree with
Yes.
me? Take steering
Yes, I
wheel
do
off
agree
and
with
weld
you.
it.
Yes.
What is taking off? If he takes the steering wheel off now, we can move that forward, away from there, and keep the heat away from it. That's what
Right.
we're doing.
Okay, keep me covered. I'm going in. Maybe. Rag soaked in water, not to cool the weld, but to stop the heat from getting to the UJ. They're quite delicate bushes in the UJ.
Ah, we've forgotten that to some
Yeah.
degree.
I suddenly realised it just then.
Yeah. On this box, which is brand new, obviously you're restricted for room here. I've adapted this box by spot facing these faces here because it was just a rough casting, and we're now using a bayonet type fitting. This is a metal to metal joint all the way through. There's no rubber or gaskets in. That's metal to metal, and so is that. So it has to be fairly accurate. And they're into a lot of room, as you can see, so you be careful how you tighten them up. They've been tightened up before we've fitted it. And if you look on here, there's two arrows. That's showing an arrow going that way, and that's showing an arrow going that way. So this one's the high pressure connection, right? That's just been put on to protect it for the time being, because what goes on there is, this is the high pressure connection. It's got a high pressure connection at each end. Can you see them two? And that one's going on there. Inside
Just
there.
hold them up again, Jim. Just hold them up to me. Hold the two ends.
There's two high pressure connections. Inside there you'll see there's
Hold it still.
a seating. Olive, if you like. It's not an olive, but it's near enough an olive. And that goes on there and seats onto that face. So that's the high pressure connection. We're putting it on now so we can get a good tightness on it and be certain it's tight. You can see that these are rated at it'll be about 100 psi, probably more actually. Oh, it's here, look, 180 bar. That's 180 times £15 per square inch. That's 1,800 plus 900. That's 2,700 psi they're rated at, if my arithmetic's correct. So I don't want anybody correcting me in the future, because I've done it in my head just as I've gone along. And I ain't Einstein. Right, that's that connection when I tighten it up. This other connection, as you will know, it's the return. So at the end of this, it goes back into the return of the pump, and that's at atmospheric pressure. So there ain't any great pressure on this. Now that's coming off, and this is the olive for it. Can you see the shape of the olive? It has to go a particular way around. If you look inside there, it'll only go one way. It certainly wouldn't go that way, would it?
No.
It has to go.
Sorry.
It has to go that way, right? And that goes on there like that. But you need the back nut on first. Back nut, then it goes on that way, and that then makes a seat on there. So if I put that on there, this is just an high pressure connection like that, capable of the same pressure as that one, though it isn't really high pressure, because at the other end we should be just fixing it with a hose clip, because it's at atmospheric pressure.
So it's a return that.
That's the return. So I'm going to tighten them up.
Have you got the gland in?
Yeah. Skipped it now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's, but it's easier to put them on now than later on.
High pressure one at the back.
High pressure one at the back. Right, we're in.
What's it looking like?
That looks like a pair of hoses thrown in a wing.
Won't the wheel, when it's on full lock, affect it, or will you going to tie them back somewhere?
Well, I would
You'll fasten them
imagine.
back. We should fasten them back.
Put them up with a P-clip up like that.
Yeah.
Just put them back with some cable. That could be done after.
Yeah.
We're going to clean that up, cut it in the middle, and then we're going to put an extension in it to extend it. We're then going to take that off, that bracket, and we're going to put one on that lowers it.
Yeah.
And that gives adequate clearance then for this arm that's going on here to operate. At this side we'll keep the link as it is, and all we'll do, we'll take that bracket off and we'll put another bracket on that extends up to compensate for what you've done at this side. What we have to do is cut that off to match the other side, so that arm can go up and down, can go higher up. these packings are in to drop this down, because when this uses this extra movement we're after, that catches on the underside of that, and it will not now catch because of them packings. Right?
Lovely.
The next job is to cut through there, clean it up, cut through the middle, fit an extension in and weld it in, taking care not to knacker or otherwise destroy the rubber mountings. So you'll have to either put a bit wet rag around them or be very careful. That'll extend that arm. We take that, probably to be able to put the extension in, you'll have to take this off. We're taking that off altogether, that bracket, and then you find we need a bracket that then extends down here. So what we've got is a bit of tube drilled out at the ends to extend it. The bit inside this 55mm. It goes on like that and goes on like that and is welded, right? But it's done in situ because they're angled. Okay. So that's what he's going to do to that arm.
Right.
Right. To do it, you'll have to take that bracket off, and eventually that bracket is replaced by that one, which lowers it. Okay. Because that's the fixing hole, and that bit I've indicated there wants cutting out for clearance.
Right.
So that's going on there. So it lowers it there, that extends it, and that then gives a working area for this arm to go into. That's going on here. You know, the drop arm fits on there and points backwards, and it gives it an area to work in without impinging on these fittings. And then we're replacing it with this. You can see that this thread and that thread are the same. So that nut will come off there and go on here, and you'll find when we offer it up that this, as you can see, is about an inch, well, 3/4 of an inch too long. So we shall probably cut that much. We shall cut that to the same, roughly to the same length as that. Can you see what I'm saying?
This is with the arms done, brackets are now fitted. These brackets are now fitted. All done. Similar the other side, they're all done. You see how they're fitted?